Jerry Lynn Schulke, Engagement Associate for PlayMakers Theater, joined by Director Jeffrey Mianza, Assistant Director Rebecca Martinez, and actor Julia Gibson. The Cake by Bekah Brunstetter runs from September 13th through October 1st. Please welcome PlayMakers.
Well, thank you so much for being here this evening. My name is Jerry Lynn Schulke. I am the new Engagement Associate. If some of you have been to these events before, Jenny Wales used to be in my position. She has moved to Charlottesville, and I am now in her position. It's just now got a new title. Yeah. And then we have with us, like Jenny said, Jeff Mianza, who is the director for The Cake, Julia Gibson, who is playing Della in The Cake. I wanted to say something different. And Rebecca Martinez, she is our assistant director for The Cake. I'm going to start with a few questions myself to our guests, and then I will open it up to you for questions and answers like that.
Yeah,
all right,
great.
yes. So the first question I wanted to ask you all is what your role is with this production. Well, I guess we just learned. And what that means in the process.
Oh, sure. So I'm Jeff. I'm the director for the production. I'm so happy to be back. I spent 11 years here, both in graduate school and then as a part of the administrative staff at PlayMakers. And Vivian Benish, who has, of course, I actually met her doing work at PlayMakers. And she gave me the great opportunity to come back and do this beautiful play. So as director, I oversee the sort of aesthetic idea for the play and try to honor the playwright's vision. Bekah is, the playwright, Bekah Brunstetter, is, she's an alum of UNC. This will actually be her professional premiere of her work as a playwright. She's actually a writer for This Is Us on CBS, NBC. What network? You
CBS,
watch it.
I think.
I do, but I don't.
I think it's CBS. I think it's CBS.
I think it's CBS. And she's
think.
up for an Emmy for her work on that show, which is super exciting. And so she and I have known each other for years and years and years, and it's just really an honor to be able to direct a work of a great friend and a beautiful artist. And so that's my role in the process.
Julia.
So I'm playing Della, and what was it? Should we talk about the play?
Well, we're going to get back to that.
We'll get back to that. Okay, it's a wonderful, wonderful play, and I'm a company member at PlayMakers. So that's how I got so lucky as to be able to be in this play. And so what do I do as that? Is that the?
Yes. Yes. We'll get back. We'll come back to it.
I walk around the stage talking funny voices.
I'm Rebecca Martinez. I am an associate director on this project, and my role, just to talk a little bit, is it's sort of defined differently between whoever the director is and whoever the assistant or associate director is. And it just bases like what are the needs that the director have and what are the needs of the production. And so my role could be keeping a second eye out just to see how things are going, or to have somebody to bounce ideas back and forth, or to have definite feedback on the production in the room, just depending on what's needed at the moment. So we stay in really close communication, and my role is to really help Jeff get the show directed in whatever he needs.
And she's on a Drama League fellowship out of New York, so she's it's a great honor to her work as an artist in order to receive that fellowship. So we're very lucky to have her here.
Exactly. Thank you.
I'm very lucky, in particular.
So Jeff, would you tell us like a synopsis of the play itself, and then we will get to back to the question.
Yeah. So the play is set in Winston-Salem. And it follows a group of 4 characters There's a couple, Della and her husband Tim, and then another couple, Macy and Jen. Jen is from Winston. She's moved to New York, and she's fallen in love with a woman named Macy. And they are back in North Carolina in order to plan their wedding. And at the top of the show, we meet Macy and Della, as Macy is sort of sniffing around Jen's mother's best friend, who is Della. And her mother has passed. Macy has a lot of ideas about like how Southern folks respond to queerness, and is pretty suspect about this woman who has this cake shop in Winston-Salem. And then it shortly comes out that when Della discovers that Macy and Jen are to get married. And then it's a play called The Cake. It's about whether or not, as she's a baker, a brilliant baker. She's supposed to be on this the Great American Baking Show, and I'm really excited about that opportunity. But it's really ultimately not about the cake itself and whether or not she makes the cake. That becomes a sort of metaphor for the larger conflict, which is about how do we, as people who have deeply held ideals, reconcile that with our love of one another, and a sort of larger metaphor or idea about family, and the walls that encompass a family that move beyond blood and move beyond anything else other than that sort of deeper understanding of love and connection. And so it's beautifully funny and humane, and I don't want to tell too much about it because, I think that's enough to start you off. But I'd say that's the focus is in the face of this conflict, because I think it's really about Della's conflict between her foundational values as a conservative Christian and the love she has for this young woman who she just discovers is gay. And it's what I love about the play, I'll just say this even though you didn't ask me, what I love about the play is that, and it's something that Bekah and I have talked about and Bekah has discovered. She premiered the play in LA just this summer, so we had the second production. And the feedback she received from conservative Christians was like, thank you for honoring this perspective, because I think she does an amazing job of really presenting a point of view that, especially in the world of theater, where I will just say, my experience is that it tends to be a bunch of progressive people with certain ideas, and what you end up seeing in plays are like these nasty conservative folks, and they end up being the antagonist. And what she's done is actually taken a conservative Christian and made her struggle the central conflict of the play. And I think so many of us, but depending on, regardless of your religious perspective, can really identify with Della throughout. She's just a lovely, ebullient character that I think she walks on stage and you're like, I want to know her. She is beautiful. She's a beautiful character.
Absolutely, she's so well written, and really that is the struggle that we watch her. And she's such a sympathetic character. We love her. She's funny. She's sweet. She's kind. There's nothing in her bones that makes her a bad person. Yeah. So I think that is why it's so brilliantly written that way. Because we want to see her succeed. Mm-hmm. So Julia, with all that said, would you talk about Della?
Actually, it's hard to talk about a character when you're in the middle of working on a character, so I don't quite know, because we've had 2 weeks of rehearsal, and we have 2 more weeks before our first performance, so I'm right in the middle of figuring out her path and her arc. So it's awkward to go, oh well, here's what. But I'm enjoying it very much because it is so well written, and that work I have of figuring out how to get from here to there, it feels very human and very real, and so the challenge is great, but it's also worthwhile. It feels worthwhile because it feels like just the struggle of a human being. You know, like my work is her work in a way. So.
Do you also want to give some insights into how does an actor, what is that process like for an actor? Say you get cast, and then what do you do even before you get into the rehearsal room?
It depends so much on, sometimes I don't really do anything at all before I get into the rehearsal room. That's where it begins. For this, I spent a little time with a baker. Especially showing me, icing techniques. and I spent some time with someone, not actually right from Winston, but from that area, listening to her talk. And I spent some time with the text ahead of time, especially places where I have chunks of text on my own, so that when we all got together in the room, I could move forward rather than having to, be completely in the page, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, and so that for me, my favorite way to work, my favorite thing, is to in the room be able to play with the other people in the room, as opposed to crafting my own performance. I'd rather see what happens in the moment with the other people in the room.
Right. Rebecca, can you speak to that also, that process of what happens? We know what in the room means. I don't know that the general population understands what in the room means.
So there's this magic room. Where it all happens. So part of and this is one thing that my favorite part, I was a performer for a time, and now I'm a director, but I really love rehearsal, because rehearsal is investigation, and rehearsal is a time when actors and directors and designers all get a chance to just play with each other, and writers, and we have this text, we have this guidebook that we follow, but along the way there's so many different questions and different ways that the text can be interpreted, or what does this mean, or actually what is this relationship between the two of us, what is this moment, what's happening in between the moments where we have spoken text, and all in the room. That play in the rehearsal room is really where those moments become alive, when we start to explore and not say like, okay, now this is all we're going to do, but to keep mining and discovering how to deepen these relationships, and how to individually as actors and also as director, how to see the overarching storytelling, to make sure that is clear as well. So it's a little bit of what happens.
And can I add to that?
Yeah.
So in this process, what we've been doing is, so we spent some days at the table, which means we spent some day just sort of like talking about the text and asking questions. And then we got up on our feet, starting to stage it, and we staged it over the course of 3 days, and then we did a what I called a crawl through. It was usually a stumble through, which is your first run through, but I did a crawl through, which is super early, and I think all the actors hated me. A little bit, yeah. Because I think it's like the only, and I come to this too as primarily an actor who is also directed, but that I think it's like both helpful for us as directors, but also for the actors to put like, okay, A, B, C, right, there's D next, and then so forth. And then we go back and we tear it all apart, and we go back and just investigate and ask questions again, and then we did another run on Saturday. And now we're going back through again and asking questions, tearing it apart. So it's this iterative process that is like, it took us actually 2.5 days to stage it, but what you will see once it gets through.
Which is really fast, by the way.
It is fast.
Yeah.
Well, yes, it was fast. I was fast. The first draft.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's actually very similar to writing. You write you just like, "Bleh, here's my first draft. And then we go back and we refine and refine and refine. And even through opening, so we'll have multiple drafts of this before anyone actually sees it. And then again, once people see it, that will be the next level of information is like, okay, now what is the audience, what are we learning from the audience, and then how does that impact us as we move towards opening once it's frozen or set through the rest of the run.
Right. I have one final question, then I'm going to open it up to the group, so get ready. Because this is such a new play, what is that like to work on an almost brand new work? I mean, we got a final draft from her relatively right before you guys started rehearsal, right?
Yeah, and then we got more edits.
Oh, you
after that.
did? Yeah. So that's a lot different than a play that's been around for 20, 40, 50, 100 years. It's a lot different process. Can anybody talk about that?
Oh, well, I'll just say that this, for me, I don't, for you guys it may be different, but for me, this has been different from a lot of other new plays in that this play, sometimes you get a new play, you come in, you read it on the page, you feel like you know what it is, you open your mouth and it just like sits clumsily in your mouth, and the playwright is often in the room, and the conversation at the table, as Jeff mentioned, is about places that are confusing, like, and the writer needs to change. This play was really, really, really well written the very first time I ever saw it. So I don't have that same sense of that we're working on a new play that I sometimes do. There was a little bit. The changes from the draft I had from when we were in the room, our first day of rehearsal, I felt myself having resistance about places where there was change just because I loved it so much. And then I'd be like, why'd she change that? Why'd she change that? And then I'd look at it and go, she really only changed 2 words. Like it wasn't that big of a change, and so it was me. It was me going, wait, why did you change what I love? But it does not, I haven't found it feeling a whole lot like a new play because the play is in such healthy shape.
Right. Yeah, right.
I'll just say I love working on new work, and in fact, I spent most of my time before I started working within an institution working on new work, and so it's really, I love coming back to it and the process, and as Julia sort of indicated, it's not the traditional new play process because Bekah's not here working with us, and it has had a production. We're still in conversation with her, and I'm actually think there'll be more changes, as not major, but some changes, hopefully. Sorry, that may happen between now and opening. But I really love the process of like an iterative process where, much more than I will say frankly, more than classic work, even though I love the classics, that I like that like you're birthing something new, and like when you all come to see it, it will only have been presented in one other community, which is LA, and at a very small theater, much smaller than PlayMakers, and so that's exciting to share something that's very fresh and something that's very new. It's like you're baking a cake. So I'm really thrilled to present it. Seriously, and I'm really thrilled to do it here. So it's so specifically rooted in North Carolina, and I feel quite honored. As I think I mentioned before, I'm honored to be able to come back to this community and to help bring it to life. So, like that.
Do you have any words of wisdom on new work?
Well, I don't know if there are but I think that just going off on what you're saying is that being able to work on something new, like you see something like Fiddler on the Roof, you know who these characters are, you know there's a dance with people dancing with bottles on their head, it's going to be spectacular. This is an opportunity where the whole team gets to really imagine and create that world together. And often when the writer is in the room in new work, the writer will be inspired by the work that is happening in the room and will take that and add that to the play as well. So actors who are always creators, anyway, when they're creating characters, even have a different role in helping the inspiration of the piece that ends up being. So it's really exciting to be in these places where we are seeing something new that hopefully the story will be told many times. Yeah. But we're having a hand in shaping what that future might be.
Yeah.
Yes, that's awesome. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, sure.
Do we have any questions from the gathering? Yes, in the back. You, yes.
I'm just curious, what is driving the changes to the play, and is it a normal process with a new play? So what I'm trying to understand is it influences from the LA? Is it influences from sitting with the playmakers, actors, and read-throughs there? What's driving or influencing those changes to a play at this point?
Yeah, so the initial changes that we received, which literally we received the day before first rehearsal, were inspired by the run that happened in LA. And there's this character Macy who is described as a sort of tomboyish, more outspoken New Yorker lesbian. The feeling that Bekah had after that run was that she was a bit more strident and harder to relate to than Bekah intended. And so she made really actually quite minor changes ultimately to the play in order to soften Macy and to make her a bit more relatable, I guess. And any changes that might happen now, which I say that they might happen, it's really they might happen. Because I think there are some questions, like there's this open question about, there is a line at the end of the play where Della says, "Where's Jenny?" Or where's Jen? Where's Jen? And we've had this ongoing conversation is like what Della actually means is how's Jen? And like it's totally playable with that word, but I think there's like going to Bekah and saying like, so about this word, one word in a play, and just having the conversation, just kind of like wrestling with that with her. Is something that we might do, and I like we haven't had much. We had a Skype call with her on Friday, and we didn't bring up much. We asked this one question about a character who's like magically shows up in places, and you're like, how does she always know? She just knows, and she shows up, and it's like, well, it's based on, and it was actually very helpful. We kind of assumed it is, and we were talking at the table, is that she's basing it on this particular shopping center in Winston-Salem, and all of these shops are right next to each other. And so she happens to, like, her fiance's in the shop, she just assumes that she's there because it's all right in one place. And of course, like, I'm not from Winston, I had no idea that she'd based it on that. And even I'll say the design that we came up with for the play was not related to that shopping center, which, again, no one's gonna know that except for all of you. So it was great to have that conversation with her in order to say like, oh, that's how she knows. And interesting that we had at the table come up with this. Well, maybe they're all right next to each other. Maybe it's a shopping center. So anyway, that's sort of a meandering response to your question, but it's just about finding clarity, I think, in the storytelling. That's ultimately what we're trying to do is to represent the idea that ideas that Bekah has, and then also making sure that our storytelling is very clear in terms of honoring that text. Yeah.
Yes, gentleman in the back.
Yeah, it's good to have you back.
Oh, thanks. I'm so glad to be here.
I miss you around PlayMakers.
Oh.
The question is, what is an actor working with directors have you brought to being a director working with actors?
Oh, wow. That's a really great...
Can you repeat that?
He was asking, what is it, as someone who's been an actor working with directors, what does that bring to my work as a director working with actors? And actually, this might probably be best for Julia to answer. I'll just say initially that, like, I think of everything as a director. I think of outside of the aesthetic of the space and how that functions, and ideas about rhythm and timing and things, which is largely what the actor's focus is that I really think of it as an actor, and I find myself kind of pretending that I'm any one of these characters, and then allowing that to influence how I find the authentic moment and trying to communicate that to the actor and say, like, I think maybe take a breath here and like slow that down a little bit, because I'm not getting the impact that I think you're chasing as actor. So, which is very insidery language, and I apologize for that. But maybe can you talk about what it's
Yeah,
because we've worked together as actors too.
Yeah. Well, and I'm a director as well,
Yeah.
and I find that being an actor helps me immensely as a director, but being a director doesn't help me at all as an actor. and that's because and when I first started directing a lot, I had a kind of a crisis as an actor, because as a director, I was developing a sense of the big picture. I was developing the ability to stand back and look at it, and as an actor, that is not helpful at all. So I developed. It made me self-conscious as an actor, because I was also looking at it from outside, which is the opposite of what you want to do. But an actor like directors that don't know anything about acting want to go for results sooner. Directors who've been actors understand that there's a process, and that there's a reason we rehearse for a few weeks, and that it's not going to be what on week 1, it's not going to be what it is on week 4, and if it is, you're missing something. And if you stick with what you find on week 1, you're missing something. So, and Jeff, those of you who have seen Jeff on stage, you know that he's an actor who acts with his heart, and that's how he is in the rehearsal room, and it's a gift to all of us.
Wow, that's sweet. Yeah, and I'll just say, I mean, one of the things that I think is the biggest challenge when you have time, and time is your friend, but it also means that there are those moments. It's an incredibly emotional play, as you might imagine, given the circumstances. And I have worked with directors who will just have you grind at it, do it over, do it again, do it again, do it again. And as an actor, I find that like incredibly deadening, because you know it's sensitive work when you're trying to mind your emotional life. And so there have been moments in rehearsal where I'm like, I don't want to talk about it too much. Like I just wanted to, we'll have a conversation, we'll have done it, we'll maybe do it twice, but I don't want to go back and do it over and over and over again, because it just, I think is ultimately damaging. If you're doing a film, right, you can do it over and over and over again, you never have to touch it again. But we have to build something that can sustain over weeks. And so for me, it's like, let's talk about it, but just enough. And so that's what I try to do, especially with those sort of more deeply emotional things. And then there are the technical things where you're like, it has to be funny, and it has to, like, you have to trip on this particular line. So that's the stuff that you can do over and over again to make sure that like, you know, textual overlap or business that you're doing can be repeatable and consistent. But the emotional stuff is the hardest thing to, like, it's very sensitive, I find. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am.
You were talking about preparing to be Della.
Mm-hmm.
You talked about going to Icy and talking to someone in Winston. Did you have to prepare for the fundamentalist Christian views in a way that education for you?
That's a great question. I have found that, I've been going to the Bible and trying to understand. I myself did not have, that is not my background. Church was my background, but not fundamental Christian. So the first week of rehearsal, we talked when Jeff made us run through the play so early. Crawl through thing, yeah. That was the thing. I'm like, I right off the bat was finding the impulse to change, and that's not what the play is, and that's not who Della is. So I have had to do some of that. Yes.
And is the play set in the bakery?
Most of it.
Mostly. Yeah, our hope is when you walk in, you're like, oh.
Do you pipe in smells?
It's so funny to say that. No, this was early on. I was like, can we get smell-o-vision? Can we have, like, there's a catering kitchen off the side of the theater. I was like, can someone just bake a cake every night so that when you walk in, you just waft it in, and no one took me up on it. But, right, yeah, exactly, right? We'll get air fresheners around. But hopefully visually it will stimulate all that for you. I mean, she has this great set of stage directions. Once there's an open, I mean, of course it's not built for a thrust, so there's the idea of like the curtain going up or something, and where we actually see the space for the first time. But you'll walk into the space and see it. But when she talks about the reveal of the space, she's like, go ahead, breathe it in. Remember fat. Remember how great it tasted. Like smell it. You know you want it. And so like what we tried to do in creating the space was like create this very welcoming, known idea of a bakery, and then it also, we haven't talked about any of this, but well, we won't talk about it. There's a whole other layer of the storytelling that is super theatrical, and so it has to be a space that can hold all of that. So it is a bakery, but then it also is multiple other spaces and times and realities, which is the thing that I think elevates the play to a level that is beyond a sort of realism that we might know, and I find super satisfying. It's actually the thing that when Viv sent me the script, and I read it, and I was like, yeah, buddy, I want to do this play, because I like, you know, people sitting in a living room having fights about things. It's just like, you know, yeah, that's one level of storytelling that is interesting, whatever. But I want something that's like storytelling that is
Can only happen in the
can
theater.
only happen in the theater. But like, why? I mean, there's a director, Rael Myrickakis, who talks about like, give me a reason why I'm not going to sit at home and watch Netflix. And I'm like, exactly. Like that's what I want. These are what I think this play does so well is like really kind of highlight the power of theater and what it can do and the places it can take you that film and TV can't. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Yes, gentleman here in the blue.
Jeff, did you see the performance in LA?
Oh, I didn't. I haven't. I've looked at pictures of it, and I'll say that the pictures. There's this one moment where I was looking at pictures, like, oh, that looks so different than what we're coming up with, and I was like, did we do it wrong? And I was like, no, we're doing something different. It's okay, Jeff. Move forward. But I have seen some footage of it, and
Christine saw it.
oh, did she really? One of the actors in
actress
it.
playing Macy saw it.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. And like, you know, it is its incarnation, and we'll have our incarnation. And of course, like, there's the back of my head where I'm like, when Bekah sees this, I hope she's not like, what did you do, Jeff? But yeah, I don't know much about that production. Yeah.
I was wondering whether it's good or bad. I haven't seen it.
Oh, I think it's information.
Yeah.
I think it's like, you know, the as director, you kind of, I mean, there's some people who are like, don't see anything, make it completely your own. And same for actors. There's some actors who are like, I will never see another person do, I mean, it's hard when you're playing Hamlet, but like, you know, you try to forget those other things and make it something that's uniquely yours. And then there's another school of thought, it's like, see everything, steal it all. You know, that it's, that you know, that's totally fine. It's part of the, you know, everything is iterative. I'm probably somewhere in between on that. But I did sort of resist. There was an opportunity. I was in California for 2 weeks before rehearsal, and I was like, should I fly down and see it? And I was like, no, I'm on my own path. I don't want it to be influenced by that. So, yeah.
Yes.
When was the production in LA?
This summer. Yeah, it closed the day before, or 2 days before we started rehearsal. So
it was just recent.
Yeah.
And that you knew that they had signed up for the show before you signed up for it. You always knew that they would be the world premiere, or
yeah.
And you were going to be the second.
Yeah, I mean,
Was it a rolling one?
well, I don't know if it's that.
It wasn't. Was it not a?
We're one of 4 or 5 productions that are going to happen around the country, but I don't know if it's technically a rolling world premiere. I mean, I think that production was its premiere. I think she's trying to freeze the script after our production, since she made those changes. But it will be after us, it'll be, I know it's at the Alley, it's at,
It's more in South Carolina.
the Warehouse Theater in Charleston, I think. And then 2 other places, maybe in Seattle, I can't remember where else. But it has, it's having, and there's also talk of a New York production with Faith Prince. So we'll see if that happens.
And the difference between, you said the LA production was in a much smaller theater.
Mm-hmm.
So how does that impact the size of the theater in directing the play?
Oh, it packs everything.
That's what
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that we've created this beautifully specific, well, what I'd like to consider beautifully specific and intimate piece that is in the rehearsal room right now, which is a space a bit bigger than this room, but there's no space for audience. And what I've talked to the cast about is over the next 2 weeks is about like, okay, and then we have to grow it, and we have to grow it, and we have to grow it. Because the thing that I've discovered both at PlayMakers and certainly at the Guthrie as well is like you can have this incredibly beautiful piece in a rehearsal room that's very impactful, but once it gets into the theater, if it can't size up, then no one cares. And I know, I'm so lucky to have Julia and the other members of the cast who have experience in the Paul Green Theater. And of course, I'm very lucky to have my own experience with that space, to like just, we're just thinking about it, and I don't want to push, because we'll get there, and time is again on our side. But it's a challenge, because it's a very intimate play. It's 4 actors, telling this really lovely story.
That particular space is not, it's tricky, not just because it's bigger, but because of the severe thrust, the audience on 3 sides, and the people in the front row are right there, are very close, and yet the people in the back are, so it's its own little special challenge.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, in the
Can you
back.
say, can you go on about that? Like, what do you do? How do you do that, addressing the person who's right in front of you in the front row and get to the back of the balcony? What changes do you make?
I'll just say generally speaking that there's the assumption is that it's about volume and that you need to speak louder. And we've all gone to shows where you're like, why are you shouting at me? Stop it. We can hear you. And so it's about a sort of specificity of intention and being able to think of your work in 360 degrees so that you're radiating, and this sounds like super woo-woo wah-wah, but like that you're radiating all around you as opposed to in a very directional space. So that's again about intention. It's just about a sort of awareness of working in 360 degrees, and then how you adjust your, and I love this word and hate it, your instrument, in order to make that sort of resonance happen. And then you as actor can talk about that in real terms.
No, I'm glad you said that really well.
Oh.
I think partly it's just in recognizing everybody that's in the room, even though you're pretending like they're not there. Like if we had a small house, meaning if not that many people showed up and they were all sitting down near the stage, the performance would change slightly. So, but if there's people here and there, like you have to have your awareness of, oh, there's someone behind me, there's people there, there's someone here, there's someone back there. And it's hard to explain what you do with that awareness, but that's part of it.
And
Instead of just pretending like we're just doing our thing and you guys aren't here.
And there's an energy exchange that happens between audience and performers. And a lot of it is performers giving energy out, but to each other. But then there's a communication that happens very subtly, as you felt in being in an audience, where actors can use that information from the energy coming from the audience to inform how they need to play in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. The audience actually, I like to think of it as kind of the last part of the
Yeah.
whole puzzle piece,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So we have all the lights, the sound, the costumes, the actors, and then the audience is then included in that whole exchange. So if the actor is just like blocking the audience out, that's not what it's about. It's about including all of that into the whole experience.
Yeah.
And an actor has to have a, finely tuned, and an actor has to have all these things going on all the time, plus say their lines, plus know where they're walking. I mean, they got all this stuff going on.
Can you peek to see the audience before you go out, or do you just get introduced to them as you come out on stage?
You, depending on what the set is like, you might be able to. I don't ever do that because I'm afraid I'll see individuals. Like I like to think of the audience as a unit, which I know kind of sounds like it contradicts what I just said about being aware, but you can feel as soon as you go out. Now you can't, depending on what the lights are like, sometimes you can't really see it. Or sometimes you go off stage and an actor will go, "Did you see, that there's only?" And I'm like, "Oh no, I didn't see that at all." But you can tell, you can feel it.
So the night I attend and I stand up and say, "I am not a unit."
Would you please? That would be amazing.
I'm an individual.
Oh my goodness,
Did you have a question?
Yeah, I'm really intrigued by each of you has described this play as really well written. And there are lots of things that come to my mind when you say that about, message, character, development, setting, lines that you can actually say and sound real. But you also talked about how the difference, I guess, in the director seeing the whole picture and the actors seeing just their role. But the playwright had to do both.
Yeah.
And I wonder if you know anything about Bekah's process and what.
Well, I'll just say one of the beautiful things about Bekah's experience like this, so the reason why she wrote this play, one of the reasons, I can't say it's the sole reason, is her father was a member of the NCGA and was the sort of the lead senator on Amendment 1 and the banning of gay marriage. And which of course passed for those of you who were here at that time, and I was here at that time. And she was living in New York, working as a playwright, and it was before she moved to LA to work in TV. And actually, interestingly, she had come down to North Carolina to work with our graduate students on a piece called Eve, which was sort of, anyway, she was devising this piece and writing this piece with the graduate students. And I had her and the director over for dinner, and we were talking. She's like, "It's just so crazy that I come home and I love my family so much, and I'm in the garage and I see the bumper stickers on their car that just completely collide with my own personal perspective." And so that was sort of the beginning. And she was saying to the group the other day, she's like, "When you meet my dad," because he's going to come to, Bekah's coming with her family to the closing performance. She's like, "When you meet my dad, he's a great guy. And my mom is like the loveliest person in the world." Like she and her mom and her dad came to LA while the show was in tech. They haven't seen the show, but her mom carried on her lap a cake from the shop in Winston that this play is based on to give to the cast. So and yet she was saying there's this particular moment where Della and Tim are watching something on TV. I'm not going to say what it is. They're watching something on TV which is like morally questionable, and so Bekah was like, I thought it was totally safe. They could come in, deliver the cake, sit in tech for a second, and then leave. And of course they come in, sit in tech, and this particular questionable moment is really loud in the space. And so she's like mortified that that's the moment that they walk in. But anyway, she was just saying like, this has been, how do I reconcile this? Who I am as an adult, who my parents are as an adult, the fact that I love them, and the fact that our ideas are just, is there a place for us to find some level of connection and reconciliation? And now I'm forgetting what your question is.
Well, really just about her process, about the big picture of the individual characters.
Yeah, and so she said that she started writing a version of this play many years ago, and then it has just sort of found its way to what it is now. And there have been significant changes in terms of how the play was, initial ideas that she had, like that, like, you know, early on that it was going to be this thing where it's like, everyone's happy and yes, this is the end and it's so great and we're all gonna get along because the world gets along in the end. And what she's landed on is something much more complicated, which of course I think actually is a more sophisticated idea of how these things go. And that, like, what I love is she's like, this play is about taking baby steps. And I think that in this moment is so needed that, like, we can't expect to change people's points of view in one fell swoop, but that we can, through human connection, find the way to make a baby step. So I'd say that these are all characters she knows, and these are all people that she is intimately aware of. And I think that's the thing that we all relate to, is like just how humane it is like beyond the fact that she's written text and dialogue that is very realistic, is that these people are complicated and that they are beautifully human and flawed as a result. Yeah.
I'll take one more question in the back from the gentleman in the hat.
Actors and actresses are clearly very intelligent people, and I think early on in the process they must appreciate and understand the overarching point of a play, and yet one of you said that it's a detriment to your acting ability if you consider, I think, I may be misquoting you, but consider the overarching meaning of the play so that the good actor and or actress just blot that out of their mind and get into the character?
Yeah, actually that is not what I think you're talking about what I said, and no, I should clarify. I don't mean that having the awareness of what the whole thing is about is detrimental. It's more about, in the moment, being somewhere in the space, having a sense of, oh, I should stand here and open up, or oh, I should do this. It's more like about the technical things about staging, and that awareness that's important for a director is not helpful for an actor. But yeah, I think it's important for an actor to understand what the whole thing is. Yeah, and there are ways that's useful that I couldn't even explain why it's useful, but yeah, it's a good question.
Sorry, Ms. Ward.
No, that's fine. I'm glad you did.
I'll take one more question.
I have a question about the relationship between the director and the set designer. In the play, did you say, this is what it's going to look like?
Oh, yeah.
Or do you work it out together, or does he come in or she come in with an idea?
So I'm very lucky that I'm working with, so Jan Chambers is the set designer, and she is a resident designer at PlayMakers. And so I've known her for years and years and years. We've never worked together in this capacity, but she's like designed clothes for me and sets that I've walked on, and then she's just a great chum, and I've just said chum, I never say chum, but a great friend. And actually she was designing a show at the Guthrie right around the time that we started these conversations, which is now where I am. And so we were able to just bat around ideas, and I will say that with everything I do, I really leverage the fact that I'm surrounded by these really talented people, and so we can talk about ideas, and but I like it to be very iterative. So we'll have a conversation about like, what the hell is this play about? And then, you know, talk about the characters and talk about the space and talk about like, well, and they're just like the hard needs of the play. Well, we need to have a door here that does this, and we need to blah, blah, blah. But I'm really interested in what her ideas are about the space. And so it was very much an iterative process of like, she'd show me something and I'd be like, yeah, that, but more like this. And then we had long conversations on the phone about like, you know, sending images back and forth as we're talking to get the sense of, so for example, the floor of the stage, which being in a thrust is important because it's such a big sort of landscape. And whereas in a proscenium, you often can't see the floor, but in the thrust, it's important. And so we had this initial idea that, so the sort of aesthetic was this shabby chic kind of quality. And she, for whatever reason, had from the beginning, had this idea of a black and white checkered floor. And so that's what we were running with and we had in mind. And then the artistic director had said, like, just be aware that that can pull focus, that like having that much texture on the floor could be quite distracting. And so then we went back and we started talking about that. And so then I can't remember if I came up with this or she came up with this, but we started looking at images, and what we found is this a wood floor, a hardwood floor that's been painted to look like it's checkered. And that opened us up because it warms it up, it makes it feel more in the aesthetic of what we're chasing anyway, and as a result, you can distress the floor in certain ways so it softens it, and it doesn't feel like this like hard tile situation, but much more organic. And I think achieves what the initial idea was, but also softens it in order to make the space a viable space for actors to move and things. So I'll just say, like, I love working with designers because they're just so much smarter than I am. And so we can have these great conversations about ideas, and then they make it like happen. And you're just like, how did you do that? It's magic. So that's, I guess, sort of an example of how the process works. Yeah.
Thank you all for being here. I'm going to pose one last question to the panelists, but give them a round of applause before that. And thank you. Thank you for all your questions. They were so great. You were a great partner in this exchange. Thank you so much for being here. So I always like to ask people, creative people, whether they're actors or directors or musicians or painters, how they got started doing what they're doing. What sparked your interest in what you do? And we can start with whoever, Rebecca.
So when I was little, my parents promised this great treat to us. Like, you're gonna go to the country dinner playhouse, if we behaved. It was in Denver, Colorado. We went and saw Sound of Music. Finally, I was maybe like 5 or 6 years old. And I saw that nun sing Climb Every Mountain. And I was like, I want to do that. I want to be that nun. And I want to sing like that and on stage. Never happened. I've never done that. But that was the start.
Mine is sort of similar in that it was just, as a kid, my mom and my grandmother took me to see plays, and I would pretend like I was all the characters, and when I played make-believe in my house, sometimes I would play school or sometimes I would play house, but I often pretended that I was in a play, and I just would get really emotional and just like make stuff up and
Not a specific play, just
no, just me, yeah. I would just, yeah.
play to the house.
Exactly. To the unit of the house.
I think that mine was very similar. That I saw I was 5, so kindergarten. I saw Peter Pan, and the woman playing Peter Pan was my best friend's babysitter, and so I was just so. First of all, I was like, a woman can play a boy? There was that, and then she was flying. And I just thought, like, I want to fly. I want to sing and fly and dance. And I'm a terrible dancer, but
You can sing and
but
fly.
I can sing and fly. So that's I think what it came down to was just like, it was about that thing, that magic that I literally think it can't happen. And I mean, like, yeah, I watch Star Wars or you watch whatever, and you just like, this is a great story. But like watching actual human bodies do these things in a space that I'm actually in the same space with, it was revolutionary to me. and then just just became about telling stories. I just love telling stories. So yeah, that's it.
Awesome. That's so awesome. Thank you so much for sharing those.
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks again for being here. We really appreciate it. You guys were great. Give them another round of applause. Yay. And good night. So we'll see you at the theater.
Yay.